Ladies and gentlemen, nandito po tayo sa Thailand as we count down the top 10 season 5 episode of
The Aruga Show.
Kumusta? Welcome to the Aruga Show, the first conservative podcast in the Philippines, protecting the Filipino family from woke ideology. Tayo po ngayon ay nasa Thailand, and we're counting down the top 10 episodes of season 5. At number 10, we talked to a psychiatrist, si Dr. Miriam Grossman, author of the book Lost in Translation.
Top 10.
Dr. Grossman, the first chapter of your book, and I'm not sure if you're already tired of discussing this disturbed man. You've talked about him many times. He's John Money. I've read John Money in other books, but I find your book to be more detailed when it comes to discussing John Money. I didn't know that there was a pushback a bit on John Money, and we're seeing the same thing right now. There's a bit of gaslighting on people who are pushing back on gender ideology. For the sake of the audience who don't know John Money, could you tell us about him?
Yeah, well, we could be here hours talking about John, but for your audience to understand, you see, it's very important to know where this idea came from. The idea that is, the foundation of gender ideology, which is that we have a separate identity apart from our biology, apart from what our body says that we are, that we have a mental or psychological sex. And that's what John Money called gender. And, he developed this idea of gender identity. And he said that we are all born gender neutral. And that any of us could eventually end up identifying as either male or female. It all depends on our environment and what kind of toys we're given and what our parents expect of us. And so he said that it was a social construct, that male and female were social constructs, okay? And he conducted an experiment on a family that came to him, the Reamer family. And they came to him because they had twin boys who, when the boys were being circumcised at the age of 8 months, there was a malfunction of the machinery, and one of the boys had his penis that was burnt off. And so they had one twin who was normal and healthy. The other twin was born normal and healthy, but he now had his penis burnt off. He essentially had no penis. And so these people ended up turning to John Money because he became known in the culture as the person who was the expert on what to do with these kids that were either born with some sort of chromosome or medical problem, or they had an accident like the Reamer twin did. And he was saying, raise these boys as girls. Just go ahead. If you can do it early enough, before the age of 3, he said, castrate the boy, and raise him as a girl with a girl's name and girl's pronouns and toys and everything else. So it's a long story, as you know.
Yeah.
But essentially what happened, just to make it, clear to your audience in a few sentences, this boy, originally Bruce, was raised as a girl. He was called Brenda. He was not told about his history. and his twin was also not told. And they were raised, they were born in the late 60s.
Mhm.
So they were raised as a boy and a girl separately.
At number
And
9 ay
they,
pinag-usapan naman natin ang isang napaka-serious topic, which is pornography. At di natin akalaing madaming mga kaaruga na naka-appreciate ito dahil sila ay lulong din sa pornography. Kaya salamat sa mga nakinig ng episode nito. Here's number 9. What's wrong with pornography? Progressive. Ngayong pinag-usapan natin ang dangers ng porn at ng M-word, paano naman natin malalabanan ito? Paano tayo makakalaya dito? For one, ang masabi ko ay hindi ito madali. And rather magbigay ako ng one-size-fits-all na method or step-by-step na method kung paano maging porn-free, siguro ikukwento ko na lang kung paano ko ito linabanan sa sarili kong buhay. It started noong Lent of 2014. That's when I committed to abstain from porn. So ang bala ko lang nun is mag-abstain for the whole duration of Lent. I offered the Lord my weakness because I can't do it myself. At lahat naman ng kasalanan natin kung under our own devices lang ay hindi natin ito kayang labanan. Ganun din ang porn addiction. Kaya ayun, noong 2014, I committed to get rid of porn in my life. At lagi naman ganun. The first step towards changing your life is to acknowledge na may mali sa buhay mo. Ganun din sa porn addiction. Kailangan mo munang maunawaan na mali ito. Kasi paano mo hihilumin ang sugat kung nasa denial stage ka na may sugat kang kailangang hilumin? Para sa akin, ito ang sinacrifice ko nung Kwaresma ng 2014. Lent is just 40 days, plus yung Sundays. But for me, it felt like eternity. It's not easy. And the culture isn't helpful because kung titingin ka sa internet, sa Facebook, sa TV, chances are you'll see a scantily clad woman. At ito rin ang mapapayo ko sa inyong mga mister para mabawasan nyo ang pag-fantasize sa ibang babae na hindi mo asawa. Kung tingin mo, magiging stumbling block mo ang babaeng fina-follow mo sa Facebook or sa Instagram, i-unfollow mo. It's better to gouge your eye and throw it away than to have two eyes and be thrown into hellfire. Of course, nung sinabi ni Jesus, pinag-usapan natin ang Book of Revelation and it's the first time na nag-release tayo with unboxing, Catholicism, almost simultaneously. And very special kasi yung guest natin, which is none other than isa sa pinaka-malulupit na apologist in the world, Jimmy Akin. So, number 8, Jimmy Akin episode with co-host Burns O. Kaasi.
Thank you, Jimmy, for that. And it's so nice to see different perspectives. And as a Protestant before, I had this tendency, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners may have this question, why can't the church just choose one way to look at this particular symbol? So can we give a sort of advice for people who are still in that mode? No, there has to be one way of looking at it. Why can't the church, if it's the fullness of truth, why can't it just, tell us definitively the best way to look at what this horseman symbolize? Because this understanding can help us in unpacking and unboxing the way we can view the different levels of interpretations for the next symbols that we're going to discuss.
So, there's no special reason why Revelation would be privileged in such a process. If you're asking the church to tell us, what this means, it's going to need to tell us what every other passage of the Bible means. And so the church would need to effectively write a commentary on the entire Bible and say, all of you need to believe this. Well, okay, that would be possible for the church to do, but would it really be the best thing for the church to do? One reason it might not be the best thing is because it would take a lot of time to do, because the church doesn't want to do anything sloppy. It does every
Right.
time the church issues a teaching, they spend a lot of time studying it first. And so they'd have to devote a lot of effort to trying to write a commentary on the entire Bible. And that would suck efforts away from everything else the church needs to do. If you've got all your theologians working on that and all your bishops reviewing it to make sure we all agree that this is what the church really says about this, then you're going to have it would be crippling for the church to try to just say, we're going to take the next century and write a commentary on the whole Bible. So that would be one reason it would be a bad idea. Another reason it would be a bad idea is that it would fossilize Catholic scriptural thought. Because one of the things Jesus told the disciples is the Holy Spirit's going to lead you into all truth.
Right.
But that happens across the course of Christian history, not at any one moment. And so if the church wrote a commentary on the entire Bible right now, then it would stop Catholic scholars from further exploring ideas and testing new ideas and arguments and trying to figure out better understandings of Scripture. So it would actually limit the ongoing development of the church's understanding of Scripture. And that leads to the third reason why it would be a bad idea for the church to do this, which is Scripture has more than one layer of meaning. And there can be legitimate differences of opinion. And if the church just said, this is what you need to believe about this passage, that would stop people from exploring other layers of meaning that also can be in there.
At number 7 ay ang napaka-controversial na document ng Vatican na linabas recently, the Fiducia Supplicans document. And kinailangan nating explain ito dahil maraming mga critics ang Santo Papa. But we tried our best and listen na lang kayo. This is number 7.
And some of you guys, baka may ilang mga followers ng podcast, might find this appalling, yung pag-defend ko sa Vatican, sa Pope, sa magisterium ni Pope Francis. Mamaya mag-unfollow na kayo sa akin. I understand kung gawin yon. Mag-unsubscribe kayo. Okay, fine. But I just want to tell the truth. And that's sad kasi minsan binibigay mo yung may bibigay mo sa conservative cause, you risk it all sa pag-i-email sa mga Catholic schools na nagtuturo ng gender ideology, pag-i-email sa DepEd. I think I even emailed McDonald's, Supreme Court, opposing yung pag-support nila sa Pride Month. And the moment you defend the Pope, parang biglang lumalabas na ikaw ang most liberal person sa isang GC or even in a room full of conservatives. Parang nakakalungkot. And guys, I'm still with you opposing same-sex marriage, gender ideology. In fact, I have a very close family member because of my conservative stance. She hates me. And she's in a same-sex couple relationship. So, di ko alam kung kailangan ko pa ng qualifier bago ko gawin tong episode na ito.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the gender ideology subjects na tinuturo sa Catholic schools, and that's our top 6 episode of the Aruga Show.
And I did what every concerned parent should have done in that situation. I sent an email to the school principal. And before I continue this story, baka gusto nyong i-pause muna. Kung may anak kayong grade 10 or dumaan sa grade 10, check nyo ang notes nila sa third grading Araling Panglipunan, and you will see what I mean. Nandun ang lessons on sex and gender. Okay, so here's my email to my daughter's school principal, and I would encourage you to use this email as well. Siyempre, i-modify nyo lang to suit your school.
Dear Principal, I'm Jay Aruga, father of Kai Aruga. I'm an engineer, a Catholic speaker, a conservative podcaster, an alumnus of this school. I'm writing because I'm surprised to see the lessons in Kai's Araling Panlipunan notebook about gender ideology. I know the school is subjected to DepEd's curriculum, but this could be one of the areas that Catholic schools all around the country should have pushed back. Pope Francis even calls gender ideology one of the most dangerous ideological colonization today. And then I sent a link to them with this quote. I'll post a link in the show notes of this episode. Moving on. Being the most dangerous ideological colonization today, it's worrisome to see these lessons taught to our kids. This is a form of grooming where students end up with a feeling that they can choose from any of the infinite number of genders and sexual orientation lobbied by the LGBTQ plus activists. It's an ideology that sets the precedent for preferred pronouns, that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. It's the dangerous ideology that allowed biological men in women's sports. Again, I put some link. It's the dangerous ideology that allowed boys to enter girls' bathroom. May link na naman. After this lesson, can the students still answer the question, what is a woman? Or is Caitlyn Jenner a woman? I know this indoctrination is being taught in public schools. That is why I enrolled my 3 children in a Catholic school. After teaching this subject, were the Catholic views on homosexuality taught? For example, Cardinal Ratzinger's letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church on the pastoral care of homosexual persons? Pope St. John Paul II's theology of the body would have been a good lesson to teach the kids to counter this dangerous ideology. The Catholic Church teaches to respect the dignity of persons with same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. The lessons in the classrooms nowadays, such as the one in Araling Panlipunan, contradict the Catholic Church teachings not to reduce a person's identity to their sexuality. For example, gay, lesbian, etc. But by treating them as children of God. The sad thing about the whole gender ideology lessons is that students are being taught falsehood. Pansexuality, omnisexuality, and all new sorts of sexuality are terms invented by activists that crept into the curriculum of our school system. Further, generations of children are being preconditioned to support bills such as the SOGI. I hope the above concern merits your attention and response from the school. For further discussion on this topic, I can be reached through this email, thejrogashow@gmail.com, and mobile number XXXXXXX. Thank you and God bless. Yours truly, J. Aruga.
At number 5 ay sinuman tayo ni Dr. Christopher West para usapan ang theology of the body ni St. Pope John Paul II. And this is the antidote to what's happening in the world now. Kaya magandang episode. Sinamahan din tayo ng ating co-host for this first episode of Season 5 na si Wada Villanueva. Enjoy the number 5 top episode.
Yeah. Dr. Christopher West. So in relation with that, like this call of how we're supposed to live out marriage, it's also to image divine love. Now, when it comes to the contraception, I mean that's also an issue that we have today.
Every question of sexual morality, when we understand the theology of our bodies, every question of sexual morality comes down to one simple question. Does this act truly image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark? Now, why am I doing this with my hands? It's like an archer, right? The very word sin is an archer's term. When the archer pulls back his arrow and he misses the target, he has sinned. That's what we do when we sin. The target is to love freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully. So let's just ask a couple questions here, right? Let's do the math. But before we do that, I always say to my students, never look at sin in your life without holding the hands of mercy. Got to hold Jesus's hand and Mary's hand. Never look at sin without holding the hands of mercy. Because if we do that, if we look at our sin without holding the hands of mercy, we're either going to rationalize our sin away and say that's not a sin, or we're going to despair, right? So are you guys holding the hands of mercy?
Should. We should.
Yes, we need
I
it.
want all the listeners
Need
out
it.
there also hold the hands of mercy before we take a look at this.
Okay.
So here we
everyone.
go. Hold those hands of mercy. And when you're holding the hands of mercy, don't be afraid to admit a million sins here. Don't be afraid if you're guilty of every one of these sins. Be afraid of only one sin, the refusal to admit sin, right? The rationalization of sin. We should lean in the direction of saying, okay, I have sinned, rather than saying that's not a sin. Because rationalizing sin away is the only unforgivable sin, right? If we don't repent of our sin, we can't be forgiven. So don't rationalize it away. Trust in God's mercy and trust in his grace to help you adjust your aim, right? If your aim is off, the solution is not to change the target, but to adjust your aim.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yes, nicely said.
Okay, so let's do the math now. Let's add it up. I'm going to ask some questions, and I want the two of you to answer.
Okay.
Does an act of masturbation image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark?
It missed the mark, definitely.
It misses the mark, right?
Yeah.
That's just simple math. Are we saying this to condemn anybody or scold anybody? No, not at all.
No.
We're saying it to come into the light so that the light can save us from the darkness, right? So let's keep going here.
Okay.
Does an act of premarital sex image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark?
It misses the mark.
Misses the mark.
Yeah.
It makes sense that if sex is meant to be a renewal of wedding vows, that's exactly what you commit to at the altar, to love freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully. If you haven't exchanged wedding vows, you cannot honestly have sex, because you'd be saying something with your body that isn't true, right? You'd be lying with your body. That's the problem with sexual immorality. It's a lie. But let's keep going with this. Is an act of adultery, does that image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark?
Another miss.
Definitely, yeah.
It misses the mark. Does looking at pornography image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark?
Definitely misses the mark.
Definitely misses the mark. Does homosexual activity image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark?
It does. Yeah, it does miss the mark.
It misses the mark. And then we got to get to this one. Does an intentionally sterilized act of intercourse image God's free, total, faithful, fruitful love, or does it miss the mark?
It misses the mark.
It misses the mark.
Yeah.
Maybe the Catholic Church isn't crazy here. I want to propose to all of the listeners that the original gender confusion, the original attack against gender, is precisely the attempt to render our genitals unable to generate. And when we render our genitals unable to generate, we are attempting to erase the fundamental meaning of gender. Remember, what does gender mean? It's the manner in which you generate new life. When we view the world through condom-colored glasses, it's only a matter of time before the meaning of gender disappears. We no longer see it. And that's the world we live in now.
At number 4 ay naging guest natin ang content creator and priest ng sa madaling sabi ni Father Franz Dison. None other than Father Franz Dison. He's a good friend, kasama natin sa Unboxing Catholicism. We enjoyed the discussion because Father Franz Dison is a chaplain of Courage Philippines Malolos chapter. Kaya pakinggan ang episode na ito as we talk about how to engage with our friends who has same-sex attractions.
Kapag may nakita ka na tinatawag sa atin na, uy, bakla, tomboy, iniisip ko agad pag bakla ng lalaki, pag tomboy ng bababae. Yung ganun bang presumption, kapag naka-cross-dress, naglalandi. Sorry for the term, ha?
Yeah.
Kapag naka-make up, may ginagawang masama. Gaano ka kasigurado dun? I mean, do you see kung saan ba galing yung taong yon? Natanong mo man siya, bakit siya nagsusot nun? There's one person na kilala ko, cross-dresser siya. Bata pa lang siya, tanggap na siya ng magulang niya, ng nanay niya. Yung nanay niya mismo ang gumagawa ng bestida for him. So, sa kanya, napaka-personal nung pagko-cross-dress niya because it reminds him of the love of his mother for him. Pero pag tinanong mo, meron bang karelasyon yung taong ito? Wala. Tapos nung minsan, sinabi niya sa akin, hindi siya gumagawa ng acts of self-gratification. Diba? Hindi siya gumagawa ng sexual acts towards himself. Ganun niya nire-respeto yung katawan niya. And this is a Marian devotee. At napaka-successful sa kanyang career. Isipin mo, ito bang tao na ito ay, kung titingnan mo, parang i-judge mo na ba kaagad na ito ay isang tao na may masamang ginagawa? Mag-isip kang mabuti, makinig ka muna. That is the call of the Holy Father. Kaya niya sinabi na, who am I to judge? Hindi niya sinasabi na i-tolerate. Ang sinasabi niya, tanggapin sa pamamagitan ng pakikinig. Dahil hindi lahat ng persons with same-sex attraction pare-pareho ng disposisyon at pare-pareho ng ginagawa. Marami sa kanila na hindi masyadong maingay na nagsusumikap magpakabanal. Maraming
Number 3, giyera ang pinag-usapan natin. Pinag-usapan natin ang Israel-Palestine war. Pero wala tayong binigay na opinion doon. Ang pinag-usapan lang natin ay ang just war doctrine ng simbahang Katoliko. And ano nga ba ang tinatawag na just war? Meron bang way para ma-justify ang pagpapdigma? Pakinggan ang excerpt from that episode.
So ito ngayon yung mga conditions for just war. Ito yung kapag ginagawa na ng kalabang bansa or a group of people or terrorist kung hindi na makatarungan ang ginagawa nila sa isang government or community. Ito ang mga dapat pagnilayan ng mga tao sa authority. Number 1, the damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. Dito sa number 1, kapag sinabing aggressor, ito yung hostile na kalabang bansa or terrorist. Unang tanong ay may matinding damage ba kung sasalakay sa atin ang hostile na bansa or group of people? May certainty ba? Or baka mamaya mga hippies lang itong mga ito, mahilig lang magpakahay, nasa gubat lang sila, tapos wala namang sinasaktan. Number 2, all other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. Na-exhaust na ba lahat ng avenues to attain peace? Kung ang danger ng aggressor is imminent, baka impractical at ineffective na ang ibang means necessary. Perhaps ang dami ng peace talks pero tila baga hindi naman ito pinapansin or sineseryoso ng aggressor. Halimbawa, binigyan na kayo ng lupa dyan. Why can't you still leave us alone? Hindi ko rin refer ang Israel-Palestinian conflict sa example na yon. Random example lang yon. Number 3, there must be serious prospect of success.
Mahalaga sa Just War na malaki ang chance of success ng inyong initiative. Otherwise, baka malaki na ang pinsala ng attempt nyo, pero para lang sa wala. Hindi ko alam kung justified ang nuclear bombing sa Hiroshima and Nagasaki noong World War II, pero imagine niyo hindi natapos ang giyera after that bombing. So, mas lalong hindi justified yon dahil wala palang prospect of success yung ginawa ng US. Number 4, the use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating this condition. So mahalaga itong number 4 dahil kailangan, ironic man, may puso rin ang pag-wage ng giyera. Hindi just war ang ginawa ng Hamas na nang-rape sila ng mga inosente. This is a grave evil. Ang nangyari noong October 7, 2023, like I said kanina, this is the true face of evil. At number 2, our 2 returning guests, si Jason Everett at my co-host on that episode, si Mo Andreas. We talk about his book, Male, Female, Other. And this season, maraming best nating pinag-usapan ng gender ideology because we're fighting this most dangerous ideological colonization of the West. Ika nga ni Pope Francis. So number 2, the Jason Everett, second time on the J. Aruga Show episode.
Jason, at the end of the book, you gave tips on how to talk to a teen who got into this culture. Without spoiling too much from the book, can you give us some of those tips? What can we do? What can we say if you have family members or a friend who identifies as trans?
Most importantly, instead of something to say, listen to them, listen to their story and help them to listen to their story. What I try to say is try to listen to the gender dysphoria, with a reverent curiosity. When did you start feeling this way? Wow, I mean, that must be hard. When does the dysphoria tend to be triggered for you? Man, that must be difficult. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm sure it's probably a little scary to share that with me because you probably thought that I'd reject you and say that you're crazy and a sinner and all this stuff for feeling this stuff. We need to take the role of listener first, instead of like, well, here's what the chromosomes say, and I'm going to disprove this. We've got to distinguish gender theory from gender dysphoria. Gender theory is this philosophical agenda rooted in Marxism and second wave feminism that is really a false anthropology. Gender dysphoria, more often than not, are sincere people really wrestling with the sense of identity and community and who am I and why don't I feel like I fit at home in my own body. They're not trying to overturn gender norms. They're just trying to understand themselves and their lived experience. And if they think that all we have to offer them is a rebuttal and a refutal, why would they want to enter a church and spend some time before the tabernacle asking God what he thinks about this? So our first role is to help them listen. Maybe where's this stuff coming from? When did you start feeling this? And sometimes the roots could be clear. I know one boy who told me that his sisters are all loved and he's all the black sheep of the family. And I said, do you think if you were born a girl, you would have been loved the way your sisters are loved? And he said, oh, I know that I would have been. And for me, it was kind of clear there that he wasn't aching to be a woman. He was just aching to be loved, but femaleness was the ticket to finding that love. And so sometimes the root is close to the surface. Sometimes it's deeper. Sometimes it's a trauma response, a dissociation from the body. Sometimes the roots are unclear. But what you should say to that person is like, look, I feel like I'm meeting you in chapter 8 of your life, but I haven't had the chance to learn about chapters 1 through 7, but I'd really like to. Can we go get some coffee? And so in the meantime, do a lot of listening and then go do your homework. Get the book, research it online, watch the stuff we've got at chastity.com. And do your homework and help them. Look, I don't understand all these terms. So if you could just be patient with me, like when I hear the word trans woman, I think it's a woman who's transitioning, but you're saying it's a man. Like, I don't understand this. Please be patient with me. I love you. They need that. They need to understand we've got ears and not just a mouth.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you are able to navigate that, diba? Understanding these objective realities, but at the same time listening to the individual person, right? I've heard, I think it was Sherry Weddell who said this, that never accept a label in place of a story. And I think you're able to embody that really well. I guess there are two dangers that I see we need to avoid. I'm a youth minister, so this is something that I also get to see. I think the first extreme that we want to avoid is to be overly rigid to the point of condemnation, the point of rejection, the point of calling everyone sinful, even though we don't really know their story yet. And then the other extreme is like overly loose to the point of compromise. We want to welcome everyone, but at the same time, we don't really stand up for the truth anymore, and so on. So maybe could you speak to that a little more? Like, how do we navigate that? So as we listen, for example, listen to the individual stories of the people that we encounter, are there other ways that we could prepare even before we get to meet them? Are there like in the case of me, a youth minister, or in the case of someone like a family member, a parent, most especially?
Yeah. Well, one is to realize this is going to be a little bit more of a marathon than a sprint. And so keep that in mind beforehand. It's not like, okay, I'm looking for that perfect conversation. It's like, no, I've got to build a friendship here. And it is difficult. It's like a tightrope. Like I don't want to be too lenient, but then I don't want to be all super rigid. I've got to kind of walking this ridge line. Because if we're giving people love, but we're not giving them the truth, it's simply false compassion. But we need to have enough of a relationship, hopefully, with them that they're able to see that, I'm willing to challenge your viewpoints on this because I love you. And I'm not challenging you because I hate you and I disrespect you, but because I love you enough to tell you the truth. Because if you love somebody, you can't lie to them. I mean, what kind of relationship is that? And so it might sting a little bit sometimes, but you want to be understanding that every case is kind of unique. So begin with great sensitivity, almost like treating a burn victim. Like you don't just go in there and say, hey, like super, super gentle, and then kind of feel it out. Like, okay, are we at a point in our relationship where I can give them a little bit of pushback, a little bit of constructive criticism to challenge some thinking, and we can enter in kind of a critical dialogue where they can challenge my thinking and we can still maintain a friendship and have a beer afterwards. Like, are we at that point? Are we at such a point that if I bring up anything to call gender theory into questioning, it's just going to incinerate any bridge that I'm trying to construct between me and this person? So that's why you can't just take a cookie cutter approach to the whole thing. You kind of got to walk with these people and see them not as kind of projects to be solved or mysteries, but more as mysteries of people to be loved instead of just problems that I've got to get this, I got to fix this person. You just got to walk with this person, because you know what? Maybe their gender dysphoria will dissipate in a matter of 6-12 months, whatever, it could go away. And usually with kids, it does. 85, roughly 90% of the time, they'll come to identify their biological sex. Other time, it can persist well into adulthood, decades of wrestling with this. While there's still solid Catholics practicing the faith, loving God, receiving the sacraments, even entering into marriage, but secretly wrestling with this on the side. And so what they need is not some walking Google to just give them all the statistics and disprove them, but kind of walk with them, because it can be a very alienating space in which to live, where their families might be like, what, you're trans, you're kicked out, you're living on the streets. Okay, now if you're a person on the streets trying to identify as the opposite sex, how are you going to find a job? Well, a lot of them find job in sex work, and which is very dangerous. Obviously, they end up homeless. They end up resorting to prostitution just to make ends meet. And it's an extremely dangerous lifestyle. And so they could already be dealing with a lot of hatred, a lot of violence, a lot of persecution from their own families, sometimes within the church. And so it's a real lifeline when they can actually come along to a Christian who, understands what the church teaches on anthropology, but can walk with them in love instead of just trying to disprove them with an apologetic argument.
And now for the number 1 episode of the J. Aruga Show, Season 5. It's the Amber Heard episode. And the joke lang. It's the Amber Rose episode. And hindi nyo alam kung gaano ka ingat na hindi banggitin ang pangalan na Amber Heard when referring to Amber Rose. Pero marami sa inyong bumoto sa episode na ito. Maraming nagka-crush kay Amber. Kaya sorry lang guys, dahil ikakasal na siya. But for the meantime, enjoy this episode.
And let's play a quick game. I'll give a topic, then you'll tell me your book recommendation for this topic.
Okay.
I'll try to give my own as well. Okay. So let's Mary. So what's your book recommendation if someone wants to learn about Mary?
I would say St. Louis de Montfort's True Devotion to Mary. fantastic book.
So mine is really not about Mary, but I love this book, Anti-Mary Exposed
I love that
by
book.
Carrie Guess. And it just like talks about the anti-Mary movement, which is radical feminism. And there's some tidbits about Mary in there that are not, you cannot read in other books.
Yeah.
So like the Guadalupe is the image that's most printed around the world.
Mhm.
So
It's
okay,
beautiful.
yeah. How about pro-life issues? You just mentioned Lila Rose book. Is
Fighting for Life by Lila Rose. But if you really want to know about the pro-life movement and how to get involved in things, I really suggest Persuasive Pro-Life. I think it's by Trent Horn, or he
Yes,
forwarded it or something. Such a
no,
good
it's
book.
about it's by Trent Horn. Yeah,
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah.
Persuasive
It's
Pro-Life.
just
Yeah.
so important, especially because he gives you actual scenarios and how to react to them. And we should always react out of love and respect. And we should never instantly judge somebody who's either gotten an abortion or wants to, because you never know their situation. And it just defeats all of the pro-choice arguments. And it's just really fantastic book.
Nice. And I heard he's releasing a post Roe v. Wade edition
Really?
of the book. Yeah, because there will be new conversation post Roe v. Wade. So
BRB going to Google this after this podcast.
yes. My suggestion for pro-life issues, Unplanned, I think. It's narrative by Abby Johnson. It's
So
a
good.
narrative book. But you still it has heart. So that's what I love about that book.
I love that.
How about church history? Do you have book recommendations on church history?
I have
Is it
so
something
many. Trying to pick one. Oh gosh, I don't know.
I'll
if
be
it's...
first. Okay, I'll be
Okay,
first.
Go ahead.
Carl Keating released a book. It's an easy read. 1054 and all that. A light-hearted history of the Catholic Church. So it's an easy read if you
That's
just
awesome.
want to learn quick about church history.
Just gonna write that down. I love books.
1054 and all that.
And all that. Perfect.
Yes.
Yes. Love books.
That's how you love books. You
Yeah.
write down book recommendations.
People suggest things to me and I'm like, wait, I need paper. I gotta write this down. I have
So
so
for
many
church
books.
history, what's your
Yeah.
go-to suggestion?
I don't know if it necessarily is church history per se. I like reading a lot of the early church fathers, especially the works of Bonaventure. But I would definitely say I like Why We're Catholic by
Trent Horn
that one's
again,
by
yeah.
Trent Horn too.
Trent
Yeah.
Horn again,
I was gonna say, I'm like, oh, I'm a Trent Horn fan. Have me
Yeah,
on the podcast, Trent.
I have I have all his books in
Oh yeah.
in Kindle at least, because that's the fastest way to get
Yeah.
books. How about Catholic social teachings?
Catholic social teachings. Ooh, I haven't read too many books on that one. Actually, now that I think about it, yeah, I haven't read too many books on that.
Oh, okay.
I should
So,
though.
yeah. Okay. And here's another book by Trent Horn and Layla Miller,
Oh,
Made This
okay.
Way. So that's my
Oh, I have heard of that book.
Yeah.
You know, I've read so many. Maybe I just don't know that I've
maybe you
read
read
one.
it, but you don't know.
You never know.
How about God's existence? A book about God's existence.
Ooh, I have a really good one for that one. I forget the name of it, but it's like right here. Hang on one second.
Okay.
It's like right. Yes. It's called A Walk with Jesus.
Okay.
And it's just like really, really good because it or that one, or I would say like, you know, St. Augustine's The 5 Reasons to Know God or something like that. I just really love those books because they go in depth into, you know, who Christ is, or even like Jesus and the Jewish roots of the Eucharist. Like that's a really good one too. I have so many.
And for me, another Trent Horn book, of course, Answering Atheism.
I love Trent Horn.
Trent Horn has been on this podcast, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh,
yes,
that's so awesome.
I was
I'm gonna have
able
to
to
email him and be like, hey, what about me? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so last category, common objections to the Catholic faith.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Essential Catholic Survival Guide by Catholic Answers,
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah,
Meeting the
that's right.
Protestant Challenge by Catholic Answers,
Yes,
because
yes.
it gives you all the arguments against Catholicism and then tells you why they're wrong and how to kind of push back against these heresies and accusations.
Nice. Mine is Reasons to Believe by Scott Hahn.
Mhm.
So
That's a good
that's
one.
my suggestion.
And there you have it, the top 10 episodes of the J. Aruga Show Season 5. Nakatapos na naman tayo ng isang buong season. So this has been another season of the J. Aruga Show. At the end of the day, it will be night. Goodbye.
Hi, this is Jay Aruga of the Jay Aruga Show. If you like what you just saw, please consider subscribing and smash that like button. We'll need all of your help to take back the culture from this ideological colonization of the West. Thank you.